one point I'd break into song, you know, and then you're stopping and seeing what's going on, checking in with the picture, see what's shifted, and then starting up again.
How are you doing this checking in with what's going on? Just explain that.
So I'll set up, I'll the way I'll work is I'll have an issue, say, okay, abandonment issues. I'm working with a guy now, abandonment issues. Give me some, I'll search out memories different times in his life, proof that he's been abandoned. Where did this come from, right? And he's got a few big ones, and everything it means to him. And we discuss up front, what do you get out of your dysfunctional, you can't breathe? So how might that help you? I believe that everything we do has a positive intent, and even if it's not really working to the best of, you know, to what we think is how we want to live, there's a positive intent somewhere. So I get them thinking, list some possible positive intents and negative intents, the things he doesn't like about his issues. And then I'll tap very generally on the big emotional drivers. You know, go deep inside, find that place where you know you're abandoned, you're alone, and I'll just really get them associated and get it as big as possible, 0 to 10, 10. Then I'll start tapping, tap, 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 tap. Break. Okay, check back in. Can you find that feeling? Is it that strong anymore? No, a little less. Okay, how do you know it's there?
Are they identifying where the feeling is?
Yeah, sometimes. So if if client can, I have to do that. Yep, if I can. Not everybody can. Right. I'll get a color on it. I'll get as much information about how they're processing that, and I'll use all that in the tapping. But at one point I'll have them, you know, when it's kind of all down as a chunk, it's down, I'll have them, now I want you to go back to that time you know you were 11 years old. Boom. What are you seeing? How'd you know you're there?
So we've got regression.
We've got regression. That's the regression portion. Now, are you in the picture or are you watching the picture? So I'll get all this information. So that's, and then what's coming up? What's the expressions on their faces? What are you experiencing? Where are you going? They'll tell me, and then I'll tap, 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 but I'm using the gestalt of the whole issue in my tapping. I'm using all the, and then Mom left me, and then Annie left me, and then, so I'm not staying at the 11-year-old, because that's not the way their mind is really working. Their mind is making a patina, a collage out of it.
Absolutely.
And so during my tapping, and then, so if I'm working with someone simultaneously, she's going on all the good things and what I want in my life, and when I let go of this, I'll be able to go to London, I'll be able to do the trip, I'll be able to, you know.
Positive visualization.
So we're doing it, well, I've elicited what they want their future to be, and so I'm mixing it, like totally confusional, because we're both saying different things at once, we're both, and I might be breaking into song at one point, like I was like, Mary had a little lamb, like just going nuts. Stop. Check in. What's happened with that 11-year-old in that scene at that time? What you see now? Oh, now it's really distant. It's kind of foggy. Okay, if you're going to pull it close, what would you see? There'd be a change, and there's a suggestion. There's going to be a shift. Something will have changed. What's changed now? Well, it's kind of desensitizing, but then it's also the setup that there's a shift.
Yeah.
And typically, that gets them looking for a shift. I don't even say it's positive. Sometimes it's worse, and then I'm closer in on what is it? How do you know it's worse? What are you seeing, hearing, thinking? I see his face, that look on his face, and then we tap that.
That's
out.
brilliant.
So, yeah, it's pretty exciting to work with in there. But that's
is it like EMDR?
No, it's a faster EFT technique. That's that I'm now training. They're not faster EFT colleagues, but they're very gifted. They're EFT class.
Do you need the other person there?
I do it alone. It's really great, really powerful when you have another person there. Because even the positive, like I started seeing, this last woman I worked on, she's like, I was so mad at you. I wanted to hear what she was saying because it was all good. But that's her conscious mind. She was recording it. She was still hearing it. But it was
Do
not.
they actually physically record it though? Do they put it on an MP3?
No, I don't.
It'd be a very interesting thing to do. I mean, in terms of analysis, it'd be fascinating to do afterwards and go through the words, the language, all kinds of aspects of the analysis. Because I'll bet there's a lot of stuff that comes out there which is almost incidental at the time, but if you really analyze it.
But then I have whatever comes up is utilization, whatever comes up. I see mom's pain, all my pain, and it's now your pain, now it's your pain. And I tap on what they say about mom, but it's them.
Okay, now I know these guys are going to ask you a lot more about this, but I'm going to keep this one moving through because I know we've got a degree of limitation. So, confusional, brilliant, and that is a great technique, and we're going to have to get you to physically demonstrate that at some point. Maybe today, maybe not, but that'd be a very interesting one to see. Now, you'd heard me talking about the idea of yoga as a means to get someone into trance. For a highly analytical client, it's a very, very good thing. Of course, it's not always practical, especially if you've got a client for a limited number of times and you haven't got a yoga therapist that you can just snap your fingers and get. But there are other aspects. Essentially, when you commit to this idea, we've got to keep that conscious mind active and engaged, then that is the key to the analytical client. It's absolutely the key to the analytical client. I would wager that half these people doing Sudoku, half these people playing games on their iPhone are actually going into trance, and maybe that'd even be a way. I want you to just do this little puzzle while I talk to you. If you're working with a child who's highly analytical, and we've had a few of those, then that would probably be a very good technique to use. Even your Rubik Cube. If, with a Rubik Cube I do it 3 times. If it's not completely correct by then, I smash it to 1,000 pieces and then blame Carrie Agin or so on. But for some people, they really want to work it out. They really want to get it right. And that is all conscious mind. That is all conscious mind.
So counting, you just have them count backwards, or is it count?
Yeah, now that is, there's probably the most boring book on hypnosis ever written, was written in the 1950s, and it was called A History of Hypnosis. It was Oxford University Press. And it's out of print, thank God. Because I don't think anybody else on earth finished it. But I did. But in it, they did talk about what I can now kind of describe as the analytical client. And they talked about the technique, and it's the first time I heard it referred to, and it is a counting backward technique. But the way they talk about it is to get the client to, you've got them into a basic relaxed state. So eyes closed, deep breath. Now picture the number 50 on an enormous screen and look at it in detail. You can choose the font, you can choose the typeface, the background, and let that number just be right there. And while I'm speaking to you, I want you to look at that number in detail, and now you're going to let it begin to fade. And slowly now you're going to allow the number 49 to materialize. Now look at that number, look at the shape of the 4. Does it cast a shadow? Look at the 9. Has it got a long tail? What's it look like? And slowly now I want you to allow that number to disappear. Now as I continue talking to you, I want you to continue this sequence. You're not thinking about what I'm talking about. You're not even interested. You're just letting those numbers run through. So obviously you're keeping your voice in that melodic tone which you would use for hypnosis. But you're giving the instruction. And this is the induction. You just give them the instruction to work through that number sequence. And then you say, okay, now you're going to continue to do that while I'm talking to you, and my words will slip nicely into your subconscious, so you don't have to worry about anything. And you're probably on about the number 46 by now, and continuing, and you're ready to let go of those things which you came here to adjust. Now you're probably on about 43, 44. It's okay, you just keep doing that. You can imagine yourself clearly letting go of this particular habit. You can see yourself in a week's time completely free of this habit, keeping your sequences rolling. You feel positive about this, you feel great about it. You're letting go of any association between this habit and working in this office, whatever it might be. So you're going into the therapy, you move in very, very swiftly. Usually by the time they're on about 46, I'm already into the therapy. And as you continue to work with that, they go deeper, keeping their own mind occupied, freeing you up to do the hard work in the subconscious. Again.
Sounds like the therapy you're doing is direct.
My terminology in that case is very, very direct. Now, and that's an example, but it would probably be dictated, if we were to think of this triangle, for instance, your yoga guy probably would be a fairly physical person. And if we think of it in terms of this triangle, if he's sort of in the physical regime, but he's also in the analytical regime, he might be, say, here, in which case a very direct approach. but combined with this analytical technique
Yeah.
would be just right.
Because before I worked with him with analytical, he was like imagining all these bad things happening while I was using a very indirect approach, and then he'd start laughing and be like, well, what if something happens? What if I'm in that field, and what if,
Yeah.
all of a sudden he'd come up with these scenarios.
You've got to keep that mind
What if I
occupied.
fall off the cliff?
Yeah. Or is there a mine on this beach? Oh, wait, there's lovely turtles swimming up the beach. They're putting their eggs there. How can I walk along the beach? I might be walking on their eggs. It can get ludicrously complex. But as long as that conscious mind is actively occupied, it's not going to go down.
Found splitting helpful where you say, okay, I know there's an analytical part of you and there's another part of you. That part of you that can drive from the grocery store to your home while you think about what you're doing tomorrow for lunch. And you get there perfectly. I'm talking to that part of your brain, while the other part of your brain can take second stage and can review.
Defining it like
anything
that's
you do.
probably
Yeah.
very good for an analytical client, because there you're educating them to some degree about the difference between the conscious and the subconscious. So that they love that.
Yeah, I'm thinking a true hardcore analytical. That's going to be one stage, and then you're going to have to distract them anyway. That's not going to be enough.
Now that top 10% of the mind there, we're occupying in that instance with numbers. You could be using puzzles. If it's a child, you could be using bubble wrap. And one of the best ones is to use breathing. Now, especially if they do meditation, so that would probably be slightly more down on the emotional end of the analytical spectrum. If they're a yoga person, they'll already know it. But breathing is a fascinating thing. It is actually a fascinating thing. If you want to do some research into pranayama techniques, it's just great. But when you get someone to actually concentrate on how their breath works, it's fascinating. We don't breathe in by pulling air into our lungs. We breathe in by the movement of our diaphragm. Cool air going in, stretching the ribs, making our clavicle, our collarbone move in a different way. You can feel the shoulder blades move down your back, and actually having them sit up to do this rather than lying down. You can feel the change in shape of the body. The stasis is kind of here, which is slightly leaning forward, which is not really that healthy, but as you breathe in, it's a different process, and that's when our body starts to feel the way it should do. It's tall, it's proud, it's confident. Standing in what some people would describe as mountain pose, but the arms hang the way they're meant to hang. The body's doing what it's meant to do, which usually means the mind will do what it's meant to do. And then as we release that breath, what's really happening? Well, our diaphragm's moving down. Warm air is now coming out of our mouths. When you breathe out, the air is warm on your lips. When you breathe in, it's cool on your lips. Now there's a lot to think about in this process. And of course what you can do is give the analytical client all these things to think about. They should be able to feel their breath actually all the way down their legs to the bottom of their toes. And then as they exhale, what effect does it have on all the different parts of my body? I can feel it in my hips as I exhale. It shifts where my abdomen accommodates itself. My massive abdomen accommodates itself. But the thing is, giving them something of such detail to think about, whether it's one tiny molecule or the massive expanse of the universe, then you've occupied their conscious mind. And you get them to keep focusing on their breath.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you have a client whose issue is he's got tons of grief and abandonment issues, and shortness of breath for 6 years.
Well, very interesting. Well, what is a shock sign?
Yeah.
It's not. It's a short intake of breath. A short intake of breath is absolutely a sign of fear. You see it in a lot of people who are going through fear
And his big
experience.
thing is fear. Now he's frightened of losing his girlfriend, so everything's getting worse now.
Right.
But would you have him watch his breath so closely? Because he's kind of obsessive about
That'd
watching
be the very
his breath.
first thing I'd do. I'd actually get him into a
Anyway.
pranayama class.
He came to me because he did some breathing exercises, and they started bringing up the old, this is interesting. So he went through breathing meditation to improve his breathing. However, that made him access all the memories that he's been putting into a closet, and that made his manifestation of issues, which is breathing, get worse.
Okay, now think
So-
about what's happening there. What's happening is you're getting a physical trigger to regression. If you do what you did during a traumatic experience, you'll go right back to it. I was with a friend yesterday who broke her arm cycling around Stanley Park. And it was a horrible break. It went right back, and she was kind of fully circular. It was just horrible. Every time she drives across the second line bridge, her arm starts twitching. She broke her arm 10 years ago.
Wow.
So that's a form of regression.
Well, we went to, he couldn't, he closed down as soon as we got into the memory, and he started pacing around the room really upset. So we just did some tapping suits, the central nervous system did that. And then I didn't have him go into the memory, I had him see his 11-year-old self in isolation. And then the tears came. Then he started completely, he could do that, he could access and associate. It was a step away from the precise memory, so with just his 11-year-old self. And then he went in and he resourced his 11-year-old self a little bit. And then we got into the room where his father died. But we couldn't go far, he started shutting down again, so we have a lot more work. But I was just wondering if it would be too much to have him concentrate on the details of his breathing, because that's his trigger.
I think the answer to that, and it's a difficult one, right? But my own idea on that one is to take that and pull it right out into the light. So get him to work on his breathing, examine it really closely, and actually use it as almost an exposure therapy.
How about the association with letting the breath come in his hands and feet and the other parts of his body as well as his lungs? So that
breathing doesn't have to be a top of body only experience. It's an interesting thing.
No,
Have
I
you
have
heard
my
of
second
dynamic meditation?
session with him Monday,
Yes.
but I will.
I'm thinking in this case, for this particular client, would it be helpful to start with dynamic meditation? So, like, what it does, it will help him, like what you are doing in dynamic meditation, you like start with free dancing, because if there are lots of negative emotions suppressed, so it all stays in subconscious and in your body, so it's in different parts of your body. So when, let's assume if this person will go to dynamic meditation class and start just working with the body, it could help him to let out like all those
Absolutely.
negative emotions, and then maybe he will be more comfortable with breathing technique. That's just
Svetlana, I'm glad you're actually here for that one, because I'd like to ask you, what do you think about the idea of using chanting?
chanting is another.
Because that's very
yes,
breath connected.
I think so.
And
That's a
Mantra or chanting, just repetition of certain words and sounds, and then kind of another type of meditation, but it's active meditation
Right.
as well. Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered an awful lot of ground. Should we do a quick question and answer? Just round the table. Anybody got any questions?
I had a question regarding tapping technique. Do you tap all over the body from like?
No, there's for classic EFT, traditional EFT, which is founded by Gary Craig, you start at the karate point, and then there's top of the head,
Hat.
eyebrow points, under the eyes, with the nose, chin, collarbone, it's really down here, or you can hit right where you hit a knot of tie, under the arms, that's on the bra line for women. And then Gary Craig doesn't use it, but I do. The spleen points right out under the nipple, a little off the outside, on the rib, and then the wrist points. There's also finger points, which are right at the base of the fingernail, where you could, if you're going to shake someone's hand, you'd be tapping top down.
So there is like a particular order, right? You have to start.
The order there is just because it's easier to do, but it's not important. And faster EFT uses just the face, around the eyes, and here, and grab the wrist where you access all the finger points. So different clients like different things. If I have a very panicky client, I'll start using as many points as I can access. It was created from thought field therapy, which was Richard Callahan, that had complex algorithms of different meridian points for every problem. And Gary Craig came along and he did one simplified algorithm, and Robert Smith simplified it even more.
I think it's probably massively helpful with our analyticals, because that tapping absolutely occupies the analytical
It's a
mind.
hypnotic therapy process in and of itself, right? You got
Yeah.
something to do.
Right.
Paul McKenna does that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
And it's distracting, which is really good too, you know, and
yeah.
then, well, and I'll tap on my clients also, you know, well, not over Skype, of course,
Right.
but that's a whole, different therapists like doing different things. I find it very useful to tap on my clients because I'm also dovetailing the tapping with the knowledge that I'm getting them in and out of trance. I'm putting them in and breaking trances.
Right.
And so I can see you, got it, go. You know, I can just watch them and see when they're getting into their thing, and I can be right there interrupting that loop, feedback loop, that association.
Now you see, that's very similar to some techniques which we're using, where you put someone in and bring them out, and then put them in deeper, and then bring them out and put them in deeper. And I mean, that's kind of on the edge of Elman as well, isn't it?
I've just been using it with just like back and forth and just back and forth on these.
There's all sorts of different tapping things going on. I've heard of fly tapping, and I'm not sure what that is. But this is the meridian points.
Yeah.
This is we're tapping on
I think
specific
this is the part
meridians.
of simple tapping. I watched a Russian video. It was a Russian hypnotherapist and psychologist guy, and he was telling this very simple technique working with negative emotions. You said it, and I just remembered it, like here and then here.
I asked them to, with our having anxious clients, I would get
Mhm.
them to do it when they're walking down the street, if they're
Mhm.
having anxiety, just to tap into
Now
it.
the thing is that the same as anchoring?
Yeah, it's kind of like anchoring, but I'm having them do it back and forth between the two hands. So
Okay, so there's some thought going into it, which is occupying its conscious mind as well.
I find it really helps actually.
Yeah.
Just going having them do
Svetlana-
that.
Just go back and forth, and sometimes I'll have
yeah.
them just go between their fingers as they're walking down the street, just to like, I tell them that it's going to take the anxiety out of their head and right into their fingertips, and where they're holding it. And
If you have them tap like this, you get.
Yeah.
If you do have them do like this, they're hitting meridian points.
like that.
Yeah.
Svetlana, when you were looking into the Russian hypnotist, what sort of year was that documentation written?
Oh, it's something recent.
Is it?
It was like a program about it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't remember his name. I was just watching
Yeah.
lots of different videos on YouTube.
Well, of course, there's the old idea of sort of throwing stress off, you know, that sort of flicking away the stress, which is kind of
brushing
interesting.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, have you ever done any Reiki,
I
Val?
don't practice. I'm not a practitioner.
No, but I mean, I find Reiki kind of weird and a bit sort of questionable, but then that's just me, it's the kind of guy I am. But some people swear by it, and some of that is literally, it's almost like physical cleaning of the body, right? And whilst that's happening from someone else, there's a sense of trance or something going on there that's kind of like that. Okay, well look, we've covered a lot of stuff. For anyone who gets to follow through on this video, feel free to ask questions and stick them in the comments below. I'll see if I can answer them. And we will continue later.